Welcome. I'm thrilled to present this to you. It's been a long time coming. I've been working on this presentation for about 4 years now, and I'm really excited to share with you some of the more cutting-edge research that we have going on with gifted education. And I came across the idea of a researcher named Dabrowski and his concept of overexcitability. It's a new way to measure giftedness, or not new, but a recently discovered way to measure giftedness in students. So next slide, please. So the purpose of the study was to explore ways to increase academic output from students that were underperforming according to their standardized test scores, and to foster feelings of confidence and belonging, because oftentimes gifted students are the misfits. On one end of the spectrum, they don't feel like they can make friends as easily for a lot of different reasons. They're sometimes afraid to speak up because they don't want to sound like know-it-alls. So we're looking at ways to give them a better outlet. And I specifically looked at music and introducing musical skills to these kids that they can develop over a lifetime to sort of act as a way for them to have an outlet to funnel all of that extra sensitivity and that creativity in something that can be useful later. I first found out about the idea of overexcitability from our resource teacher. She's no longer here, but she came into our faculty meeting one day with a article called "The Gifted in the Shadow of the Night," and it was all about how our gifted students oftentimes have this heightened sense of anxiety, and they're more at risk for depression because they experience the world at an increased way of sensory processing. So everything is coming at them, and it's louder, it's brighter, it hurts, it feels great, but it's really high highs and really high lows, and they're kids, so they don't have the emotional maturity to filter all of that. So what you see is once they get to high school, they hit puberty, a lot of times if they haven't found a positive outlet where they can just take all of that energy and put it somewhere productive, they're at a lot of risk for drug experimentation, other types of substance abuse, getting mixed up with the wrong crowd, just finding ways to sort of numb that sensitivity. As I sort of dug into it further, she actually had suggested some students to me who might benefit from being tested for overexcitability because she had some suspicions that they might have them, and they were all musical kids. I started doing some looking around to see if there was anything that I could give them that had already been researched, and I found very little for musicians. There's been a lot for writers and for visual arts, but hardly anything for musicians. And I wanted to find a way that I could take these kids that were in my Glee program, that were in my music program, and boost their self-confidence and give them something to really be proud of. An opportunity to do something great. So, possible solution, they need productive outlets. They need something to funnel it into. They need something that they can feel like they can be good at, and it's okay to say that they're good at in front of other people without sounding like a know-it-all. They need that structure from the teacher, so that it's not just them saying, "Oh, I'm really good at this. I'm going to do this now." They need the teacher to say, "Look, you can go here, you can do this, and I want you to be the leader in this area." And teachers and other sorts of mentors are very powerful influencers, as we all know, which is why we all went into education. And they need us every step of the way. They need to know that it's okay to be different, that it's okay to want to try stuff. Okay, so my research questions were, what is the effect of use of increased performance and leadership opportunities through music on the academic achievement of overexcitable and/or gifted students? And what is the effect of the same leadership opportunities on the intrinsic psychological and social confidence of overexcitable and/or gifted students? So how are these opportunities that I'm going to give them going to help their grades, and how is it going to help their own personal feelings of confidence? Okay, so significance of the study is I already sort of touched on. We have the potential to help students learn positive coping strategies. we're focusing on young musicians, which is not an area that is widely researched, and they could possibly, if successful, the strategies could possibly be taken from this small pilot study and increased into something larger with more impact.
Can we ask questions now?
Sure.
When you're saying young,
Yes.
what's your definition of that?
Our school is pre-K through 8th grade, so I was focusing on my students. A lot of the research that I found was middle school or above, and the one study that I did find about musicians was high school. So I was looking at, you know, these guys aren't really ready yet for super intense musical training. We can get them started in a lot of ways, but I wanted to find things that were attainable for elementary students. All right, so in order to sort of understand where we are going with the literature, with this idea of overexcitability, I just wanted to briefly touch on sort of the history of how we identify gifted children in the United States. So intelligence testing and skills assessment have only really been used in the school system within the last 100 years. The information gathered from these assessments helps us tailor the curriculum to individual student needs, as we know. A lot of the ways that we test intelligence is through, we're all familiar with IQ and the Stanford Binet test. But it's what we're going to talk about here is that there's different ways to measure giftedness, different ways to measure intelligence. And some researchers came across some ideas where they decided, they knew that giftedness involved more than just academic performance. And so we'll talk a little bit about that soon. I'm focusing specifically on Dabrowski. He was a Polish researcher and psychologist. He was mainly working in the mid-century, and his works were not translated into English until the 1980s, which is why we haven't really had much of a chance to research his ideas. Once it was introduced into English, translated into English, people just really latched onto it because it's a phenomenally innovative concept, a different way of looking at these kids and how we can help them, and gifted people even into adulthood. So he said that academic grades and IQ scores weren't the whole picture. So his first book was called his Theory of Positive Disintegration. Now what that was he talked about how personalities are shaped by our genes, our biological impulses, and on how our culture shapes us, how our social environment shapes us. He says at our base, we are self-involved. We are looking to advance our own agenda, often at the expense of other people. He saw that some people were able to rise above that base functioning. We see it all the time as teachers, you know, how we start off low, and then you can see the ones that start to look outside of themselves. But that process is a painful one, and it's through a reaction to environmental stress that kind of takes this existing narrative of I'm the most important person in the world and shatters it. And then how do they rebuild that narrative? So some people are able to rebuild that narrative with more of a concern towards other people. Every person encounters suffering. Every person encounters crisis. Some of our sufferings and crises are smaller than others, but they're all big to us. And how we react to that really has a lot to do with how we can develop into better people, into more productive members of society. So some people react to those deeper and in a much more disturbing way. They can really internalize those crises, and then they're forced to reconstruct their self to find equilibrium again in order to feel like they can move forward. So, oh, okay. So his overexcitabilities, he has 5, and I loved reading about these because I immediately understood where he was going with this idea. I saw faces as I was reading this for the first time. So there's psychomotor overexcitability. That's the person that has to do everything right now. Rapid breathing, can't stop moving. They have to have physical activity or they will explode. The next one is emotional. Everything is big. Everything is a huge deal. they're the ones that wear their hearts on their sleeves. You can just see in their faces how they're doing. You can see when someone hurts them. You can see when they're confused in class and they don't know what's going on. Number 3 is imaginational. These are the ones that are the daydreamers. They live life kind of on another planet. They can really see everything in vivid detail, bright colors. They love to dream and come up with ideas. They're not always the best at making those ideas happen, but they sure love thinking about them. Our intellectual overexcitables just love that feeling of their brain moving along at a nice fast clip. They're curious. They love to problem solve. They just love it when they come up with an original idea and phrase it in a way that nobody else has ever put it before. That just really gets them going. And then our sensual overexcitables have heightened senses in all of the senses. Everything smells stronger, is brighter, is more colorful, is, you know, more pleasing or more painful depending on what it is. All right. So in our literature, we also see that the overexcitables are all responses to environmental stress. So you have to have something that sort of kicks that overexcitability into gear. All 5 overexcitables we've seen are from existing research are greater, more pronounced in creative people. Under positive pressure, that overexcitability can evolve into something that can really assist them in becoming great musicians, great artists, great people. It can become flow and it can become focus, which is so needed if you're going to be a master violinist, singer, anything really. You need that in order to reach that level of mastery. Okay, so we can get this positive pressure from a lot of outlets. One of the most important are the adults in the child's life. Parents play a huge role, as do teachers and then other mentors that come along the way that recognize something in a student and kind of points them in a path that says, why don't you try this and see if you're good at it? And you need that parental support to sort of say, yes, we're going to dedicate resources and time and allow them to try this and to develop this skill. Because when it comes to musicianship, it doesn't matter how much raw talent you have to practice in order to be a master at it. So you can have all of the musical inclination in the world, and if you don't have time to sit down and develop that skill, it's just not going to do you much good. So we have to work really hard to find these kids now as they're young and introduce them to these ideas so that by the time they get to be in their late teens, their early 20s, they can really be on the track to a professional level of mastery in these areas. All right, and as I touched on before, these deep feelings, these sensitivities put them at risk for destructive behaviors if they don't find a positive outlet. We have the stereotype of the disturbed artist in our culture, the writer who, you know, disappears into alcoholism, or the artist who just, you know, he's down on his luck and he's, you know what I'm talking about, the starving artist. And so we're trying to find these kids before they get to that point, obviously, and provide them with a way out of it. All right, and then the kids that we teach today, and my generation, the digital generation, have an even bigger challenge. Before, it was a lot harder to disappear into your own world. Now we all have a screen in front of our faces, and we can personalize our world to be one that we are comfortable with. So if these overexcitable kids have a lot of trouble fitting in, they don't have to get out beyond themselves and meet other people. They can just stay with their digital friends in their digital world and never get to that crisis point that will break them and allow them to move forward and have that positive disintegration experience. They think that life should entertain them. It's all here to make me feel good, and they often don't have the skills to sort of move on and to develop and mature. And we have to encourage them to get past that, to get away from the screen, to throw them in situations where they have to deal with people in real life. All right, so also as we said, musicianship is a learned skill that requires practice. The other thing about music is it is a social phenomena. It cannot be separated from its social context. You have if you're going to be a professional musician, somehow you have to be able to communicate your gift to the world in order to be successful. The thing that is almost ironic about these brilliant musicians who struggle so much with being in friend groups and in front of people is that they spend hours and hours and hours developing an amazing skill, like playing the violin, and the only way they're ever going to be successful with that is to be okay with being on a stage in front of an awful lot of people and being in social networks where they can find places they can play. And then when you get musicians together, you have to learn how to work together as a team and as a group. So it's a team sport. So we have to give them challenging activities that give them the social skills just to sort of get that ball rolling. All right, so my kids, we're all 4th and 5th grade students here at Stella Maris Academy. We're a small private Catholic school. All of them just happen to be female. They all tested as overexcitable in at least one of the 5 categories. Many of them had more than one excitability, but we focused on one for each. Since they were 4th and 5th grade, they ranged in age from 9 to 11. They all were musically inclined. They're all native English speakers. And then we mainly serve an upper middle class demographic in our school. So all of the students that were chosen because they were recommended to me by Miss Reynoso. And because I was their teacher and I was able to do all of this in the classroom. They were all members of my Glee Club. We meet after school twice a week. 3 of my kids had a GPA lower than 2.75 and 6 had a GPA of 3.5 or above. All right, all of them were experiencing difficulty in one of these areas: getting along with other kids in the class, paying attention during class, remembering information for tests and quizzes, particularly if it was a lot of information, presenting projects in front of peers, in front of the class, feeling valued in their friend group, and then using their musical ability in front of other people, like having a musical solo. Some of them are really paralyzed by some pretty deep stage fright. Some of these kids were performing below a C average in some of their academic subjects, and their Iowa test scores, which is the standardized test that we use, were in the 90th percentile or higher. So that told us that they should have been performing at a much higher level, and something was going on. And we had a feeling that their sort of feelings of not fitting in might be contributing to that. They didn't feel safe, so they weren't able to perform at their full potential. So my music class meets once a week for 45 minutes, and then we have a couple of rehearsals for our church service. Once a month we do a mass service once a month, and then we have music performances twice a semester in class and outside of class. So I did this study for 8 weeks. I observed them in music class in their setting. I gave them the Overexcitability questionnaire, which is something that our resource teacher had, and it's a list of questions, and I have a sample page for you to see a little bit later, so that I could assign their individual projects, and then I created a rubric and a questionnaire to sort of see where they went, and then I compared their academic and their citizenship grades at the beginning and at the end to see if we made any progress. All right, so the instruments I used were the Overexcitability questionnaire, my questionnaire, my rubric, and then the grades, as we already said. Okay, so here is a sample from the sensual questions for the Overexcitability questionnaire, and they were supposed to just sort of answer very quickly, whatever the first thing that came to their mind was. We didn't give them any time to think. They just had to react. So, and they ranked them all 1 to 5. So 1 was low, and then 5 was, yes, this is me completely. So I find viewing art a totally absorbing experience. I love music and respond to it with my whole body. I delight in the shape, the feel, and the texture of things. I have a strong response to tactile experiences like playing with Play-Doh or molding clay. I'm moved by the beauty in nature, and I would say like walking in the woods or walking along the beach. I'm extremely sensitive to colors and shapes and designs and textures. I really notice differences in aromas and in odors. So we had a lot of fun giggling about that one.
So you're reading those questions to them and they're just responding?
Yes, yes. And grading those was kind of a crack up because I just had them do it on lined notebook paper, and you could see that these were kids that marched to the own beat of their drum because the way some of them numbered it, there was one girl that did it in an N pattern and one girl that answered like all the way down, and I had to flip it over like 4 times to I don't know.
And what were their choices for answers? 1 through 5?
1 through 5, yeah. And when it was something that they didn't have at all, they almost always said 1. And when it was something that they really connected with, it was always a 4 or a 5. I had very few 2s or 3s as answers. Very strong reactions to that one. And then these were my questions. I just wanted to see how they felt about being in school. So, and then I had the same ranking system, 1 to 5. How do you, I feel on top of my schoolwork. The things I'm learning in school will help me in life. I can express my creativity in school. My teachers actively help me in school. I can concentrate on my schoolwork in the classroom environment. I feel safe presenting projects in front of my class. I am a strong leader. If I have questions, I can ask my teacher. If I have problems with a classmate, I can go to my teacher for help. And I feel like a unique, useful member of my class. This was my rubric. I assessed them on 6 different areas for the end of their project. So the stage presence, your body language, how much your tone improves, how confident you just look in front of the class, the quality of their project. I didn't let them get away with anything that I knew was less than they could, which some of them were squeaking by in their academic subjects with less than they were capable of, and they weren't going to get by that with me. How much they were mastering their subject matter, the technique, which was a really big deal for some of them who had certain projects that we'll talk about later, how accurate they were, and then their ability to communicate with others in the group. So our limitations were that we had a very small sample, so we can't really generalize the results, and then we can't control for things like home life, absenteeism, you know, all the things that sort of come up in a normal school life. And then for ethical considerations, we didn't do anything that I wouldn't have already done in a normal music class. We okay? All right, there we go. I kept all of my data in my password-protected laptop. I assigned them numbers too, so I didn't have anything with their names on them. I was really careful to keep my notes anonymous. And then I have a locked file cabinet in another building that was my desk when I was using this, and I refrained from asking leading questions, which wasn't always easy, but I really was very careful with how I worded questions when they were filling out progress reports. Okay, so the study took place during my normal music class and after-school glee club. The custom assignments were given to the students to work on when classwork was complete, so they could use class time if they had extra. And then I offered individual coaching after school and during glee club. They were assigned these to sort of supplement the lesson that they were already going through with me. All right, so one of the special assignments was set and costume design. This was for one student. She was given the script for our school talent show, which was written for by our 8th graders every year. They pick a theme, and that year's theme was Dr. Seuss. It was really cute. And she was asked to design props and costumes for the actors. She had a lot of fun, and her high score was in the imaginational category. She certainly fit the daydreamer profile. She really embraced the challenge. She had a lot of fun with it. She went shopping for props at thrift stores. She took a special trip to LA with her mom to the Fabric District to see what she could come up with. She looked up YouTube videos of Seussical the Musical online from other school productions. She edited the script written by the 8th graders. This little 4th grader edited the 8th graders' script to include more opportunities for visual gags, and she found this giant remote control, and she wanted them to be changing the channel as the different acts came up on stage, and I thought that was so brilliant. And she created a Pinterest board that she showed me for her project on her iPad. All right, another student created choreography for our Glee Club talent show performance. We did Philip Phillips' Home, and she came up with all the moves for that. The student's psychomotor score was 4.3 out of 5 on her overexcitability questionnaire. She had an existing background in dance. Of all of the students, she looked like she made the least amount of progress, mostly because she has been in dance class since she was very small. So this was something that she'd already had developed as a skill. She used her dance instructor to help her plan the choreography, so she had another mentor outside of school to sort of help her along. And I gave her the last 15 minutes of our Glee rehearsals twice a week to work with the other girls to teach them all the dance moves for 6 weeks. She did have to learn how to deal with conflict from some of the older girls because there was a little bit of pushback since she was at the younger end of the age range. But she was extremely proud of herself at the end. Yes?
How old was she
This one was she was a 5th grader. Yes. And the oldest kids that we have in Glee are in 8th grade. Mm-hmm. 2 of my kids scored 4.8 and 4.7 out of 5 in the sensual category, and I thought that they would really benefit from learning how to conduct, because if they love the feel of things, then conducting is all about how the music feels and conveying how the music should feel. We talk about, are you conducting in oil or sludge or air? What are you moving through? So I thought they would have fun with that. They had to learn a song to direct the mass choir, and it's kind of a nice little introduction to something like this because the choir's sort of tucked in a corner, and they were very happy to hide behind a column in church to conduct the choir, so it wasn't too much too soon. But it did require a lot of practice because that's a skill that's not easy to master. They sent me video updates, which is so easy for them to do now on their iPhones. And they had to gain the trust of the choir members to be effective. The first couple times they got up in front of the kids, I was getting a lot of sideways glances like, is this right, Mrs. Pridmore? So we had a lot of trust building to do, but by the end they were doing a great job. And then solos. 2 of my students sang Seasons of Love solos from the musical Rent for our final performance of the year in Glee Club. So we had a 3.7, which is kind of on the lower end, and a 4.8 out of 5 in the emotional category. The reason I assigned solo work for the emotional category was because I thought since they're so connected inside to their emotions that they could really make that come out in their voice if we worked with it in the right way. One was extremely nervous about singing in front of the school. She just had really paralyzing stage fright. She would shake whenever she thought about it. We practiced on stage in the parish hall so that it felt more like home up there. And at the podium in church if it was possible. And then I borrowed something from my undergraduate voice teacher, talking about turning stage anxiety into something fun. Dr. Clemens taught me, take that feeling of, oh my goodness, how am I going to get past this? And think about that moment on a roller coaster when you're inching up to the top, about to go over the edge, and how that's kind of fun. So we have to take that anxiety, those palms sweating, the shaking, and the nervousness and turn it into, ooh, this is a thrill, I love this. And then it led to more confidence in Glee Club. Go ahead. And then one of my students who scored a 4.7 in the academic part of the Overexcitability questionnaire was asked to do an extra research project to enrich a lesson on Ella Fitzgerald. We did a jazz study for our Black History Month lesson that year. She had very little fear in presenting for the class. But she did learn how difficult it can be to keep everybody's attention as a teacher in the front of the room. She made a Prezi. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but it's like a PowerPoint presentation online, but it's got a lot more animation. She had a lot of fun making that for her little mini lesson. She found a fantastic video on SchoolTube that I'd never seen before of Ella Fitzgerald doing the one-note samba, and it's just amazing. And I loved watching it. And I've used it since, too. And she actually memorized the scat solo for How High the Moon and sang it for the Glee Club, right? I know, it was adorable. I was so proud of her. And one of my students had expressed interest earlier in the year in learning more about how to write songs. And she wrote a song named Friends, and she performed it for the class at the end of the year. She scored a 4.5 out of 5 in the intellectual category. of the Overexcitability questionnaire. She's a very shy student. She was definitely one of the kids that does not speak up very much in class. Had trouble fitting in with friends simply because she had trouble. She had a lot of social anxiety reaching out beyond her, but she taught other students her song, and she showed some true leadership qualities. Yes, ma'am.
So how did she write a song?
Okay, yes, that did require some coaching. So she loved making up songs, and she had a notebook before this project ever started that she filled with song lyrics. And it was really cute because she would make word art, like if the word was look, she would make the O's, I's, and things like that, or sun would have a sun drawn around it. And so she'd shown that to me before and said that she wanted to be a composer when she grew up. And so what I did was I took her little song, and she had a melody that went pretty well with it, and I put some chords under it on the piano. It was very simple, but we talked about sort of musical form and how we can structure the verses and the choruses and how it needed to flow and repeat and be a little bit more singable. So she was a little hesitant to reword at first and to edit her baby, but but it was a really cute song that she came up with in the end of it. Yeah. Something you can count on, something you trust, and when it comes to having it, it is a must. I'm not talking about the mall or the latest trend. The thing I'm talking about is a friend. How cute is that? Fourth grader. She was a fourth grader, 9 years old. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so they completed their assignments during class and after school. I did give them some specific deadlines that they had to hit just to keep them on track. So some of them moved at a quicker clip than others. Some of them had to practice a lot more at home. But I was happy to help them all along the way. And then we had a way to communicate, and you have a copy of my progress report form. So I think it's the back page, all the way on the back there. And it was just really short, but it was sort of a springboard for them to just communicate with me about maybe where they needed some extra help or where they were struggling or what they were having a lot of fun with. And I encouraged them to video themselves. As I don't really like watching myself on video, and they didn't either, but there's nothing more beneficial, I think, than watching yourself do something and go, oh, that's not what I thought it was in my head. So I really encourage them to do that. Okay, as far as assessment, I gave them a practice assessment before they ever started, just so that I could have a baseline for study to see how they improved. So I kind of gave them a little practice exercise, and then in the skill area that they were working in. So for example, the conducting students, I asked them, had they ever seen a conductor before? They always said me. And I said, all right, if you were going to conduct this song that they knew from Mass, how would you do it? And I played it. And so we went from there. That's how. So I just sort of graded the rubric, and then I took their grades in all the subject areas, and I tried to find a correlation between an increase in their leadership and their academic involvement after the project was over. All right. So just to rehash what our questions were, what is the effect of increased performance and leadership opportunities through music on the academic achievement of overexcitable and gifted students? What is the effect of these same leadership opportunities on the intrinsic psychological and social confidence of overexcitable and or gifted students? And I said and or because you don't have to be gifted to be overexcitable, and you don't have to, and vice versa. They can be separate. Most often they work together. But I thought that was an important distinction. All right, so here's what I found. We saw an increase of an average of 88.4, B plus, to a 92.4 in all academic grades overall. And there was, so 4.6 increase between quarter 3 and quarter 4. Go ahead. Okay, so there's my little bar chart, and you can see we did inch up in every area, just a little bit.
Did you compare that to students from the third quarter to the fourth quarter that weren't in your study? I mean,
just overall, I didn't, not specifically, but I do know, and I touch on this a little later, I know that you kind of expect to see an increase in grades between the third and the fourth quarter just because kids go, oh my goodness, it's almost summer, I have to get my GPA up, and they kind of clamp down a little bit. So next slide, please. So overall, everything increased a little bit. So, and like I said, we sort of expect to see that uptick in grades at the end of the year. Okay, so after the conclusion of the project, the social confidence did increase too. So I got, so this is, the light blue is the little social questionnaire that I had, and you have a copy of it too. We saw an 18.5% increase on all of the answers to that overall. So everybody's answers went up, which was really cool, yeah.
And this one, again, you're asking them orally, you're asking them these questions, and they just give you the answer.
Right.
1 to 5.
Right, and I wrote it down. Exactly.
And they knew you were going to be looking at them specifically?
Yeah, they did.
And not the rest of the class. So they kind of
right.
already kind of knew.
Yes, they knew that they were, I told them that I was going to try something with them because they were in my glee club and I just wanted to see. I said, I think you might have a talent that we can develop in this area. Would you be willing to let me try something? And they were all really into it. They told me that they thought it was really fun to, everybody likes answering those quizzes, in the magazines about yourself to find out. So I think that's how they looked at it. They had a lot of fun learning that they were, intellectually overexcitable or things like that. I was very honest with them through the whole thing, and with their parents too. Kept everybody in the loop.
And everyone that you asked to participate participated?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd had them for a while, so I know.
When did you do most of the research? It was last year, or was it year before?
It was last year. Yes, yeah, last year at the end of the school year. So some of these kids aren't here anymore. Next one. Yes, the social confidence was definitely the most noticeable, and I saw it in their peer groups and just the way that they interacted with people, and I know, especially with the shy girl who did her composition piece, she just blossomed. It was really neat. She actually tried out for the talent show, and I don't think she would have done that the year before, and she just singing in front of the class was a big deal for her. All right, so limitations to the study were, student motivation, that's a variable. How much they wanted to do it really had a lot to do with how the results came out. Their prior knowledge in the area that I threw at them was something too. Like I said, the girl that did the choreography, she knew a lot about dance, but the kids that conducted had no idea what they were doing at all. So they had a long way to improve. And then the ability to receive constructive feedback had a lot to do with it. How they took that, here's what you can do to improve. Some of them really, some people internalize things like that a lot more, and oh, I must be, I'm failing at this. Especially those kids with the more type A personalities. They want to do so well, and if they don't do well, sometimes they can unplug and just say, well, I'm not good at this, so I'm not going to try anymore. We had to work past that, and we had a very small sample size. Okay, so I couldn't make any definitive conclusions because of our limited sample size and therefore limited ability to provide accurate statistical data. We can't really generalize based on what we have. But I would love to see a larger study done, a longer study, a larger study, with at least one full school year and a much larger sample size of kids. I think a lot of kids could benefit from a program like this. And with more skill development options. I just kind of took what I knew. I already took what I knew I could teach. But I think if we got more teachers involved, more researchers who had different skills than I do, we could really increase the study. All right, that's it. Any questions?
Plan on doing like a similar thing this year?
I have. I have. I've definitely taken these ideas, and I think doing this project has made me a better teacher. It's put me on the lookout for ways I can encourage kids to grow in these specific areas, and to understand the kids a little better, and to say, oh, you're behaving this way. That's because, you know.
Yeah, this is kind of related to what you're just talking about, but I was wondering, just your opinion on this, and that's all you can give, really.
Okay.
Can you imagine how much this changed? I mean, that 18.5%, that's a huge change.
Yes.
And how much of that is because you're paying attention to them, and how much of it was because they actually got up in front of students and did something like that?
That's a good question, and I don't know. I think that's a very individualized question for each of the kids. Some of them already had a lot of social confidence going into it, didn't have a problem getting up in front of people. Some of them, like I was telling you about the girl who did the song composition, really, I saw the improvement. So I don't know. I think we all know how good it feels when a mentor or someone we look up to says, you're good at this, or I think you'd be good at this, you should give this a try. That feels really good. So I'm sure that had a part of it. But you know, gaining respect and a feeling of safety in your own, you know, everyday environment that you walk into, that's enormous too. So I think both of those. I think they were both, yes and. I don't know which one would be bigger.
How did your other students who weren't involved in these kind of special projects, how did they respond to the kids who did? And did you feel that they felt a little left out because these kids may have been perceived as getting special attention?
No, because it was a Glee Club thing. So that was sort of how I put it out there. And I did open up the opportunity and said, if anybody else would like to try something like this, I would love to coach you. So I didn't make it an exclusive thing. I was careful to put out there that, you know, I am, you know, always happy to teach you about the stuff I love.
And they seemed, the kids who weren't involved seemed to support the kids who were?
For the most part. They were, we have ground rules for presentations in front of class. I couldn't really comment on the interactions outside of class, but everything that I saw in class was good. We really practice here at SMA our social skills. We have them on the wall in every classroom, and we talk a lot about paying attention to other people, being concerned about their feelings. So it is something that we have an active conversation about here. And it's nice that we're in a faith-based environment, and we can talk about how we need to honor God with our actions towards other people. So I thought everybody responded well.
And how many students in Glee Club?
This year I have 13. Last year, about the same number, 12. I think 12 at the time of the study.
And they're all girls?
I have one boy this year. One brave soul. And I'm working on 2 more. They said that I could get them if I brought donuts more.
Okay.
I know, whatever it takes, right? Anything else?
I have my finger on a question. There was, you mentioned that there's a noticeable general trend in academics to go up between quarter three and quarter four, just in general.
Right.
Is there a way, perhaps in future studies, to be able to compare that general trend with a specific trend or specific results of your students to kind of factor out that general tendency and get a more accurate, a specific understanding of how your program helped those students?
I hope so. It's something that I would like to look into more. I don't have the answer right now. I would love to collaborate with somebody on a larger study of this.
Do you suppose even if, so just checking the students who did not, in the Glee Club who did not, if you check their grades, and it's still a pretty small sample, but
right.
You could perhaps at least say the ones who didn't participate in this, their grades went up this much, and the ones who did, their grades went up that much.
Sure, yeah.
And that might even be something you could go back and retroactively do.
Yeah, that's a good point. that might be worth looking
Except
at.
for she's trying to finish.
Better done than good. We all remember that mantra.
Right.
But for future presentations.
Yeah, yes, sure.
Yeah. I do have a question that goes back to like the beginning of your presentation.
Okay,
I should have asked it back then.
Sure.
I just wasn't sure whether we were able to ask questions while you were presenting. So, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. But you were talking about what gets kids outside of just thinking about themselves.
right.
So what was the term that you were using, that students are self-absorbed or something like that?
Life is entertainment, the metaphor, the life metaphor.
Well, and that they're just only concerned about themselves,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
that then pain happens and suffering happens. And
A
so
point
I
of
just-
crisis.
Right, a point of crisis. So, and you're saying then that that point of crisis doesn't always, but can be the
Can
catalyst
be the catalyst for growth.
for thinking outside
That's
themselves.
Dabrowski's theory of positive disintegration, that shattering of one's original concept of self by a crisis, when put back together in a way that makes the person grow, is positive disintegration. So they break apart and then they reintegrate in a better, more evolved way.
It's really related. I mean, I was just trying to clarify if that's what you were saying.
Yes.
Have you ever heard transformative learning? Very similar kind of a theory, that it takes some kind of an event, something
Right.
that
Yes.
kind of wakes you up, or
Right. Cognitive dissonance, yeah, is sort of a similar concept. This doesn't make any sense to me, and
so Dabrowski, was he looking at kids or
Yeah.
anybody, or
he looked at everybody. He was an educational researcher, so he tended to focus on students, but it was students of all ages. He worked at a university, so he was focused on older students as well as younger. His work is worth reading. We have it at Ryan Library.
and you said he was just not taken seriously, or
He was, from what I've read, a more self-deprecating kind of person, shyer, more introverted, not really prone to market himself well. And people who knew him personally loved him and were very loyal to him, loyal follower. He really inspired that sort of following in his close students and in the people who worked with him to translate. But when it came to the broader educational community, his ideas were just so different than what anybody else was putting out at the same time that he was kind of laughed out of the room at times. And since he was, this unassuming person, they didn't, take him seriously. Yeah.
When was he born?
Oh, good question. I can't remember.
I'm trying to place
He
him.
was doing his work in the 50s, 60s.
50s,
Yeah.
so the communist era where he was behind the Iron Curtain.
Yes. That had something to do
And
with
I'm
it
sure that
too.
would-
His
Yes.
book was published 1964.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that would have had something to do with his acceptance in the West and our access
Yeah.
to his information.
well, but
Right,
he
and he was
wasn't
Polish,
accepted
yeah.
in Poland either, as
Right.
you're saying.
Right.
He was just not accepted. He was not. Yeah.
Right.
I was just going to say, I thought it was excellent. Maybe if you, I like the quantitative data. I thought that was really great. But maybe if you do a broader study or were involved in something like that, you'd want to focus on some more qualitative data.
Okay.
So personal interviews, things like that, maybe
Okay.
to shed more light on some of the specifics of the changes that were happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm remembering it because it kind of stuck with me. Your mention of like the digital era, where
Yes.
the kids are kind of living in their own little digital
Bubble.
bubbles.
Yeah.
And not venturing out, and how that's kind of causing concern because they're not getting. Is that my understanding? They're not getting to that crisis point.
Right.
But wouldn't that just say that their crisis point is just not the same? Like their crisis point is more of a not breaking out? Like, so
Yeah.
how much research has been really done on that group of people?
I don't know of a lot. Everything I know is anecdotal. I've talked to Lynn last year, and I talked a lot about what we were talking about Asperger's, people with Asperger's, very high functioning, most of the time, but no social skills. And how since they have access to computers and can form a world in which they are comfortable, they don't learn social skills. She was telling me in previous decades, if you had somebody like that, oftentimes you could kind of just through life experience rehabilitate and teach them how to act in a public sphere, and oftentimes you couldn't even tell if they had Asperger's. But she seemed to think, and I tend to agree, that it's exacerbating the situation for all kinds of quirky things. I think we could talk a lot in different directions about the impact of the internet and how it's a positive thing, and yet it has a dark side.
So that's your original thought, maybe, that this digital age is preventing.
That's not my original thought. I had a citation for the idea of the life as entertainment metaphor. I'm definitely not the first person to say it. There's been quite a bit of research about that in particular, about how
linking that with Dabrowski's
yes
event or whatever you
right.
called it.
Yeah, that was the link. I was interested in that link. Yes.
It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm going to give you a standing ovation.
Oh, thank you.
I just
Thank you
wanted
for
to
coming.
say that, to watch Crystal in the classroom. She just is so sensitive to all of those things that you discussed with her students in general, not just, your music students. So she, every day, she just really has a connection with those students. And we've seen some crises with some students, and with your counseling with them and helping them has really turned them around. And that has been excellent to watch. So this
Thanks,
was
Mrs.
fabulous.
Lowell.